Hi everyone, and welcome to another video, and this is my first one on UFO. In this video we are looking solely at the secret organization, levels of defense against the threat from outer space. So, UFO was filmed back in the late 1960s. It aired in the early 1970s. It was all about aliens coming to the Earth, harvesting humans for their organs so the aliens could extend their lives. A secret meeting is held within the UN to set up a organization solely to deal with this threat, and that organization is S.H.A.D.O. S.H.A.D.O will defend the Earth against the aliens. It had 3 lines of defense, the first being outer space. S.I.D, Space Intruder Detector, would monitor a number of deep space satellites. If a UFO or UFOs were detected, S.H.A.D.O would go on to red alert. Their first line of defense was the moon base. It operated as offensive and defensive. Occasionally, the moon base would fall under attack from UFOs. Its defensive measures were these ground vehicles sent out on the moon surface to defend the moon base. Its main weapon was the offensive interceptors, 3 of them. They would come out of their silos and be guided towards the incoming UFO or UFOs. Their sole purpose was to destroy the UFOs. The interceptors carried a very large missile, which was very effective. It had immense destructive firepower. What's not known in the show is, did the interceptors carry another 1 or 2 internal missiles? Once the first missile was fired, then they would be moved in to the nose section and it would be ready to fire again. We don't know. The interceptors would do a good job in most part in destroying the UFOs, or even a mere near miss of a UFO could cause damage to the UFO. But of course, some would get through because the aliens would use their own tactics against S.H.A.D.O. If a UFO got through, the second line of defense would then kick in. Patrolling the Earth's oceans were skydivers, high-speed submarines that carried an interceptor on the nose cone of the submarine. The interceptors would be launched from underwater to take on the UFO in Earth's atmosphere. The skydiver that bore the brunt of this was Skydiver 1, and Sky 1 was the interceptor. Its mission, of course, like the interceptors in outer space, was to destroy all UFOs, which of course in most part it did, and like the Interceptors in outer space, it would damage some UFOs, and of course some would slip through. So the third line was the ground forces. Now, while all this is going on, S.H.A.D.O has airborne radar and radar installations on the ground tracking all of this, so they know exactly where the UFO is, or roughly know where the UFO has landed. S.H.A.D.O would then dispatch a number of transport vehicles, aircraft that is to say, sorry. They would take off and land at appropriate airfields as near as possible. Now, the UFOs did have a weakness. They could only survive in Earth's atmosphere for a period of 2 to 3 days before they would disintegrate. Earth's atmosphere had a corrosive effect on the UFOs, but of course S.H.A.D.O doesn't have 2 to 3 days just to sit around waiting for that to happen. So its ground defences were these mobiles. This is a command mobile with a radar disc. It would command 3 other mobiles that were sent in to locate the UFO and destroy the UFO. Occasionally the mobile personnel would have to go out on foot and engage any aliens that were out there on foot. They had 2 purposes. The main one was obviously to eliminate the alien, but occasionally they were ordered to try and capture one of them alive for interrogation purposes. So S.H.A.D.O's organisation of its 3 layers of defence in most parts worked, but it was a very expensive organisation. So there's my little video on the lines of defence that S.H.A.D.O used, and if you're wondering what S.H.A.D.O stood for, there's your answer. UFO was a very good series for its time. Unfortunately, it only lasted 1 season. There were plans for a season 2 called UFO 2, which was to take the fight to the aliens, but this did not come about, unfortunately. And what was on the drawing board was rejigged into a completely different new show, and that show was Space 1999. Overall, UFO was a consistent, good series. There were a number of straightforward episodes, and there were a few very strange episodes. Mindbender, Time Lash, to name 2 of the strange episodes. One of my personal favourites, and I think this would go for quite a few UFO fans out there, Kill Straker, a great psychological battle between Foster and Straker in this particular episode. Very good one. I would thoroughly recommend UFO. It's well worth watching if you never viewed it. It's a very good series for its time. And in due course I will be doing a few more UFO videos on different aspects of the show. So there we go, folks. I hope you enjoyed my little cheap, cheerful video there. And I hope you all have a nice day. Thank you very much. Goodbye.